We're going to go ahead and get started. So it's 7 o'clock, and welcome to Desert Blockchain Camp. And this is for you ladies, it's a new venue for us, and we're still building it out and doing some things, and I think you're going to find some really cool stuff happening here in the near future. I'm Jay Carpenter, the founder of Desert Blockchain, and what I always say to start the sessions off is Desert Blockchain is about community. It's about us coming together here in Phoenix and Arizona and beyond, and getting to know what people are interested in, what are you pursuing, and seeing if there's some sort of common ground that we can all pursue. Because what we're going to be talking about tonight, this Libra, I think shifts the whole ecosystem into a whole new realm, and the amount of opportunity is enormous. And for things to happen here in Phoenix and Arizona, sessions like this are really key for us to get together, find out about what our interests are, and see if there's some ways that we can collaborate. So, since we're a small group, why don't we go around and introduce ourselves, let everybody know what you're interested in getting out of tonight, what you're interested in the area, in the realm, in blockchain, cryptocurrency, whatever, in general. And why don't we start with David?
Well, ironically, I came here a friend wanted to go something, right? We could do the movie. I didn't know what this was about. I kind of looked it up. It was about cybercurrency, right? And so I just said, you got to do that.
Cool. All right. Shirley, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Shirley. I'm not very nice for telling you my friend had told me about it, and it's like, oh,
okay. So you're brand new to the space, and you're learning. And
yes, we are, and we just coming here. We got lots on the way, so we're learning on every level. So.
Good. You visited the Grand Avenue.
Yes, on the way here by thinking.
Yeah, I know. That's where we were at like a year ago.
Oh, so that's what came up on Eventbrite. Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
I've been here 3 times and I made the same mistake.
Okay.
Yeah. I apologize for that, but it is a cool neighborhood where we were at.
It's beautiful.
Anyway. So we are getting that corrected. I have registered Desert Blockchain Camps on Google Maps, so hopefully that'll be straightened out.
Hello.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. There's probably 20 people down on Grand Avenue sitting around in a parking lot right now. When does this thing start? So one thing about this whole space, this was a Staples office distribution warehouse, and it's been abandoned for a number of years. There's no electricity in here. The bathroom closest to us, which is women's, the toilet doesn't really work in there. If you need to use the women's restroom, Eileen can show you where the one's at. A short walk across the parking lot, and the men's urinal works. So sorry about the crude nature of the space, but step by step. So, Ron, will you introduce yourself? Okay. But you've been in the cryptocurrency space for a couple of years, so you know a little bit about it. And you've already said some things during the first hour that were right on point. So, Shannon.
I know nothing. I'm a student. I'm here to absorb and learn.
Carolyn.
I've always been watching and kind of being part of these sessions periodically. And just again, it's really learning, but the more important what I'm interested in is It was understanding how I can apply it to how I want to type the concepts to what we're doing in my industry. And then I'm also very interested in this particular subject, just understanding the Libra as a disruptor, and then also think about how it's impacting, of course, Bitcoin, who is off the charts. It's just,
Yeah, I heard Bitcoin hit 14,000 today.
yeah, no, it's insane.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So Willie just joined us. He's ready to retire with his Bitcoin hold.
Well, I came to pick up the candy bucket, but it's gone.
No, the candy bucket's over there in that gray.
I got Twix and M&M's.
Nice. Willie Masters, he'll introduce himself, but he comes and supplies us with candy. So he supplies us with candy bars and stuff like that. So
I don't buy it.
that's right. He's the most valuable member of Desert Blockchain. So Shannon, I'm interested. What are you studying? What are you studying?
Business law, marketing, whether or not to
So did you know that ASU Law School has a big blockchain program? Did you attend GETS? Did you attend the GETS conference? The Governance of Emerging Technology and Science? Really cool. Be sure to check it out next year. So. Since you mentioned philosophy, I'm going to highlight, I assume you're a member of Desert Blockchain on the meetup, whatever. If you're not, you should become a member. It's free, whatever. And I send out an update on Thursdays. But in the middle of July, there's going to be something called DWeb Camp, which is an hour south of San Francisco on the Pacific coast. And it's like 500 of the people in the world that invented the internet and are inventing what's next in the internet. And there's a lot of people that are interested in the philosophical, the social, the legal implications of what's happening with the centralized web. So anyway, you should definitely check that out. And there's a group of us, small group of us going from. So, Dennis.
My name is Dennis. Hi, everyone. I'm an electrical engineer by trade. I got into crypto about a year and a half ago. Originally started out with mining because I was fascinated by the concept. And then that was a segue for me to learn more things about investing, trading, charts, technology, et cetera, et cetera. And now, I'm just trying to learn as much as I can. Specifically, I've heard a lot about Libra. I don't know much about Libra yet, but I'm trying to learn. So I'm trying to
Cool. Thanks, Dennis. Willie.
Willie Masters, I was a business analyst for 22 years, doing requirements for system changes for creation, as well as creating test scenarios and doing testing. I've been a real estate agent the last 4 or 5 years. About a year ago, the blockchain sucked me back in. So I'm diligent learning about how to navigate the blockchain world.
Well, you got an interesting project that you're passionate about.
I created the requirements. They're pretty much done for a website for charities to sign up and receive cryptocurrency donations. Different kind of charities, schools, food banks, churches, whatever. But I've submitted everything to the Ethereum group or a grant, see if they'll fund the programming of it. But I have a couple of requirement things that aren't done yet because I need a programmer to help me. But Ethereum programmers are too busy. So I turned to a guy in Russia who did some blockchain but wasn't familiar with Ethereum, so he's kind of studying up on it. I haven't heard from him, so follow up. But that's the idea, is to as the cryptocurrency world grows, charities are always looking for donations. So why not have a place where people can go to and donate their cryptocurrency? Maybe Libra will fund it.
They might. They've got a whole social impact section. I don't know if you saw that.
I was looking yesterday, I went to the white paper, and I had a link to things like that, but it didn't really give a lot of information where I could submit something. I don't think they're that far down the road yet.
So for some of you folks that are kind of new to the realm here in Phoenix, one of the things that this space is designed to do is to bring people that have like software skills here, and then allow them to learn either from one another or through workshops how to build things in the blockchain world. And on July 27th, we're going to be having what's called the Arizona Blockathon, which will be up to 50 developers and UI UX designers that come together. We're going to be focusing on public administration use cases. So things like the Arizona Corporation Commission, State of Arizona, all their back office operations could be enhanced with blockchain. So part of the intention of this space is to bring people together that can start to build some of these constructs. And we're going to be using a platform that's just been introduced called ChainStack, which is designed to be as simple as possible a way to build something on the blockchain. In fact, multiple blockchains. So stay tuned for more information on that.
This put records.
It could put records on the blockchain. It works with something called multi-chain right now, Quorum. Another one that starts with a Q, I can't remember. I think it works with Ethereum, I believe Hyperledger, or will work with Hyperledger pretty soon. So it's kind of blockchain agnostic. It's also storage agnostic. Amazon Web Services, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, various things. So anyway, we'll be having some sessions on that.
This from that conference last week, that guy that, did they really fly him in from Singapore?
Yeah.
For that meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a long way to go for that.
He was traveling all over the place.
Okay.
So yeah, it wasn't just for that session, but that'll be July 27th. Here, yeah. And by the way, we're putting in some air conditioning and stuff like that. So, Ravi.
I'm Ravi. I'm into IT infrastructure. I'm here to learn about Web 2.0, decentralized blockchain and opportunity.
Scott.
Yep. I'm Scott. I'm primarily interested in privacy and security, so I'm by nature of that Monero contributor. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, we just had like a Monero conference in Denver this past weekend where we actually had people from the Coin Center talk sort of about Libra and a Q&A panel. And we had like a DEFCON village coming up around it.
Cool. Anything you'd like that was a particular interest that came out of the Monero conference for you?
For Q&A panel, I mean, probably best if you just watch it. It's the videos are still being processed, like the full live stream chunks are there if you want to watch them, but the actual like break it down by video is still happening. But it's like the first session on the second day. So I think it's mainly they focus mainly on the big summary. I think the sentiment was a lot of people are just kind of armchair lawyering at this point because it's so far out in terms of implementation. A lot can happen.
Whenever Libra's
concrete.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But they think like legally most like Congress and just general world government probably going to be more so interested in the reserve aspect of Facebook more so than price.
But what about Monero? So for those of you that might not know what Monero is, it's would you say it's autonomous?
Well, it's basically Bitcoin, but with a focus on privacy. So rather than Bitcoin, where you have basically rich lists where you can look at any address, tell how much that address has, target people, do chain analytics. Monero is designed to be censorship resistant in terms of like Bitcoin where you can, oh, this is coming from this address. I don't like this address because, it's a casino or, it's a enemy of the state or whatever, and blacklist stuff.
Yeah.
So is it true that Monero is the favorite cryptocurrency of drug dealers because of its privacy?
Honestly, I think Bitcoin is still favored just because, you look at like the more public facing like hacker events. So you look at like the school system in Chicago with the whole ransomware, and hackers are still using Bitcoin. WannaCry 2 years ago, the only hacker group that's used anything outside of Bitcoin really has been shadow brokers and use a combination of cash, maybe 100,000, I think, ish, off of selling the NSA spyware. WannaCry, I think, made 150,000 correctly.
Well, also in terms of ransomware, the city of Baltimore was shut down. Are they still shut down?
They were going to pay. I must have read.
Yeah. So
yeah, so there you go. So it was like 600,000 in Bitcoin. So
Yeah.
Oh, really?
yeah. So I think from what I gather, hackers are more likely to use Monero to actually mine via botnets, simply because unlike Bitcoin, which is pretty much all ASICs at this point, Monero is actually CPU friendly, so it makes more sense to have a botnet that mines Monero and then say we have different Yeah, hacking someone's computer, basically putting a payload on their computer that mines whatever, or executes whatever. In this case, mines Monero in the background. Some are more complex than others. Some will detect, there's user activity, so maybe I should ramp down the mining a bit so that the user doesn't notice any slowness with the computer.
So this commandeering computational resources has taken favor over the ransomware. So it's easier for the hackers to take over somebody's computational power and mine Monero than it is to hold them for hostage and have them come up with a ransom to get their data back.
Historically, although I think given the precedent set by Baltimore, it kind of sends a message to, malicious actors that, cities are willing to pay $600,000, whereas previously that really wasn't the case. General common sense still is the common sense of if you pay people to unlock your stuff with the hack, you're just going to continue to encourage more and more people in the space. So I think probably in the future, especially when it'll get much more crazy. Like I didn't hear about the Florida thing until just now, but
Two cities.
But yeah, it's only going to get worse because public infrastructure.
Yeah.
There you go. So.
And there have been hospitals that have been held hostage for ransomware and so forth. So it's a growing problem, and it's tied into cybersecurity. So
is Bitdefender the best for this to find?
I probably wouldn't be the best person to ask. I don't really deal with the AV side of security. Just common sense of keep your system up to date and so forth.
Did we class hacking protection and keywords for a clear script program? That a great thing on for parts and endpoint in that vendor seems to be
Yeah.
well, there's definitely a lot to explore in the space. So is there anybody that wants to say anything about Libra before I start going into the presentation? This is just an open conversation. I've put together some information, and I'd love to hear your view on sort of this take of Libra, and then like Ron, you've brought up some points about Libra that are aligned with what this presentation indicates, and I'm sure most of you, or many of you, know different parts of Libra and have some things to contribute. So we'll go ahead and get started. What is Libra? Well, it's a consortium of companies that's basically been led by Facebook to create a cryptocurrency that their goal, according to their literature, is to make it easier for people all over the world to transfer funds.
Like world currency.
Basically a world currency. And I think they give a figure, there's something like 1.7 billion unbanked people in the world. And, who's watched the video on Libra? Nobody. Maybe we should just go ahead and watch that, and hopefully this will play. Oops. Well, hopefully you can hear this. My speakers are cool. Stable and secure. What if everyone was invited to the global economy with access to the same financial opportunities? Introducing Libra, a new global currency designed for the digital world. Backed by pause it and see if I can get that. If the volume should be fast for open labels. Simple for small business and secure for bits of it. Instead of your it's powered by blockchain, making it safe and accessible. No matter who you are or where you're from. So join us as we move on money works road. This is it, and it's just the beginning. So clearly you can see that the intention is to make a global currency. And any comments about that? Lots of that.
So Jay, how's it different from every other cryptocurrency that needs, apart from Facebook having that's secure?
Well, that's it.
So,
is that the only difference?
No, there's big differences. First of all, it's like a consortium that comes to consensus. And I'm not totally clear on what their consensus mechanism is, but it's something like, it's basically they vote among themselves, and they have to have a certain quorum.
The white paper says 2/3.
Yeah, 2/3 have to say, this set of transactions is correct. And that's way, way different than Ethereum or Bitcoin, which uses proof of work, basically, in order to sort of like elect what transactions are going to be processed in a given block.
So this is not.
It's not what?
It's not.
No, it's not proof of work. No.
Well, yeah, I think probably to me the biggest keyword, if you're using keyword, is it's not permissionless. It's permission, so it's compared to other cryptocurrencies where it's basically anyone can run a node, etc. Basically, you have to get approval from the consortium,
Right.
Run, which makes it drastically different in terms of it arguably not really being censorship resistant at all. It's much more, controlled.
So if all of us broke our piggy banks and we came up with $10 million, then we could have access to being one of the founding members, which is not exactly permissionless. Now, in their white paper, they state the objective that they want to move to a permissionless system where anybody can participate. But that's way, way different than Bitcoin or Ethereum or many of the other cryptocurrencies. So that's one of the differences. Another difference is they've got this bucket of regular currencies that is backing the Libra. That's a big, big difference from everything else because there is no traditional asset that's backing Bitcoin or Ethereum.
But for other stable coins, sometimes there is gold. Or,
Yeah.
so since you mentioned the consensus algorithm on proof of work,
It's basically just voting. That's
so,
is my understanding.
okay, so they all look at the members of the
Yeah.
they look at the transaction. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, nobody's actually looking at,
Right. Yeah.
at the transactions, but they've got the computer algorithms that are checking the cryptography to say, okay, is this valid?
They're doing validation.
Yeah, they're doing validations. And they're doing a significantly different method than Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, look at the blockchain all the way back to the Genesis block, all the way back to zero, in order to determine how much somebody has to spend or how much they're getting and so forth. This, I believe, is done on an account basis. So it's like Jay has his account, and we're going to look at Jay's accounts and transactions, and we're going to basically see if what Jay wants to do, if Jay wants to spend X amount of Libra, does he have the right to do that? And what's he going to be left with at the end? So that's a big, big difference. Any other differences that anybody can?
It's like even Facebook have only one node. It's like 100 companies, 1,000 companies. Everybody have the same record. So
Yeah.
when you transfer, like 2/3 of them approves. It's like pretty much a traditional companies, private companies running it instead of one company having all your banking data. Now 100 companies have same data, so that everybody knows what you have. So when you move the money, so or your asset, everybody has the in a ledger. So right now, if you look at Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Bank of America doesn't have your Wells Fargo info. But in this case, Visa, all the companies that are backing this will have your information. So that's how this works. Even Facebook, the main contributor, it has only one vote. It's not like it's taking the majority of the share or 50%.
Yeah. So those are some of the differences. But what I'd like to move into now is a little bit different dimension of this, because in the literature in that video that we saw, they make references to the telephone companies as well as the banks. And I put together this chart that is kind of an analysis of like this, I'll call it the social media industry versus the telecoms versus the banking industry. And this actually goes beyond Facebook. Could say the same thing about Google. You might say the same thing about Twitter, some of the other social media realms. But and I've been looking at this for some time because I came from the telecom sector, and it seems to me that the telecoms have competition from both the social media realm as well as the banking realm, and vice versa. Because the banks now basically can process SMS text messaging, voice calls, pretty much everything that the telecoms can do. They can do it via a banking app. And theoretically, the telecoms could be transferring money. Now they haven't, but if I was running the telecom, AT&T or Verizon, I'd be really, really concerned right now. So I put together this basically pretty simple chart to just sort of highlight the competitive advantages and competitive disadvantages of each sector. And in the banking realm, I would say that most people trust their banks and the banks have like a high touch relationship with their customers. We all walk into bank branches, we can call up customer service. There is no customer service 800 number for Bitcoin or Ethereum. And to my knowledge, there's no customer service number for Facebook or Google or Twitter or what have you. So I kind of categorize that as high trust and high touch. Same thing with telecoms. We can call a customer service number for AT&T or Verizon. We can walk into an AT&T or Verizon store. There's no Facebook store to my knowledge. There's no Google store to my knowledge. The difference though between the banks and the telecoms, let's say their competitive disadvantage is that they're siloed. They don't have a comprehensive integration of services, and they're fragmented. So they only do little bits of the big picture that we're talking about tonight. The advantage of the social media realm is that they've got a very broad integration of services. Facebook has WhatsApp, Messenger, and the photographs, the video, all that stuff is sort of melting together, and now they've got currency. Their competitive disadvantage, in my view, is we don't trust them for the most part. I'm making a generalization, but most people don't trust Google, they don't trust Facebook, and they don't have, like I said, touch points like the banks.
How many people have had their businesses hijacked by Facebook?
Businesses, for example.
They take the domain.
Oh, they've taken the domain?
Well, the name.
Oh, the name.
Yeah. And actually.
You have? I take it?
They're taking your domain?
Business.
It's the business.
They said, well, and their excuse was, well, we just wanted, so many people were looking for you that we just did this for you. Says, yeah, but this isn't something that we wanted to do.
What is it they did?
Like I just said, they provided, they put the business name and for users, and I told them, I went to them, I said, well, these are all our users. These are all our users. And somebody says, yeah, so then they just kind of get back to me, which is completely bizarre.
Well,
so I understand the mistrust.
Yeah. Well, I think it's basically, the breaches, the data breaches, the questionable, who owns the data? All the pictures that Jay's put, all this content that Jay's put on Facebook, there's a question mark. Does Facebook own that? Does Jay own it? So forth. So anyway, that's just kind of a few dimensions of the differences between the competitive advantages and disadvantages. And I would say these three sectors, these three industries are all starting to blend together. Now let's take a look at the capitalization. So market capitalization is basically if you take the number of shares that are outstanding times the price per share, and you total that all up, that's what the company is basically worth. And here you can see Chase Manhattan is worth about $352 billion, AT&T $237 billion, and Facebook is worth $540 billion. So if you start to calculate percentages of what's Chase Bank worth as a percentage of Facebook's total worth, it's about 65% of Facebook's total, and AT&T 44%. So just in terms of value, Facebook has a huge advantage over Chase as one bank and AT&T as another. Now, even if you add the value of Verizon to AT&T, I believe it's still under the total market capitalization of Facebook. So here's an excerpt from the white paper that basically, again, starts to hint that Facebook is well aware that they are starting to encroach upon the turf of the telecommunications industry as well as the financial services industry. So for too many parts of the financial system look like telecommunication networks pre-internet. 20 years ago, the average price to send a text message to Europe was 16 cents per message, and now anyone with a smartphone can communicate across the world for free with a basic data plan. And back then, telecommunications prices were high but uniform. Whereas today, access to financial services is limited or restricted to those who need it most. Those impacted by cost, reliability, and ability to seamlessly send money. So this again hints to me that it's very clear that Libra is starting to blend into both the telecom as well as the financial services realms. And Facebook spent, I believe, it was $22 billion for WhatsApp after everything is said and done with the burnouts and all that stuff. So let's see. Another measure, just in terms of how many mobile users are there. Now, this is a couple years old, but for Chase Bank, they have 25 million mobile apps out there that are installed and users. B of A, 20 million, and Wells Fargo, 18 million. Again, this is like a couple of years ago, 2016. AT&T has, like 53 million users, I believe it is. Oops. Or maybe it's 353 million users. Anyway, whatever it is, that sounds like a lot of users, but look at Facebook. Facebook has 2 billion users, and YouTube 1.5 billion. WhatsApp has 1.2 billion as of February 2017. Could be even more. Facebook Messenger 1.2 billion. Those numbers completely eclipse the number of mobile app users that the banks have and the telecom industries have. So this starts to get into the nature of the social media platforms is actually starting to look like virtual sovereignties. And I think, and Ron was bringing this point up, earlier in the pizza and networking realm, just out of the blue. But think about that. Think about Google and Facebook effectively becoming virtual sovereignties, sort of like virtual nations that are spanning the global geographic legacy sovereignties. And I think that's one of the main reasons that you're seeing all of a sudden the political policymakers just kind of coming alive, let's say, to put it mildly, over this Libra introduction. So any comments about that?
I know as a plan, the one weakness in this entire thing is that Facebook, for its size, can very easily get done because it's relying on laws. It's relying on laws of the countries, whether it's the U.S. or France. And France has already said that it's not going to participate. That's not going to allow it to participate. So, and I can imagine Holland would probably be right behind it in the UK. So, because that's their whole shtick is currency. So, that's how they want to be. But the problem is that they're relying on U.S. laws. That entire structure is on that. You change that. I mean, I understand they're going to spend billions, they can easily pop up billions for Bay Street, lobbies, things like that. But that's the reality of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's nobody around it. The reality, unless you buy president, basically. So,
Well,
Which Google has admitted that they're going to try to do.
that's exactly, and so, but that's short-sighted. That's short-sighted reality because trying to bypass, the characteristic of the nation that it gave this. And so it's very short-sighted on their part. It's not going to work. So, because history has proven that out time and time again. So,
well, I don't think anybody knows exactly what the outcome is, but the point you're bringing up is that there's this sort of fundamental clash now between these virtual platforms and the legacy sovereignties. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
about $54 billion, that $540 billion buys a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe Facebook will unfriend all the friends of the politicians that don't play along.
That's funny.
Your friends are gone.
So to continue along this thought process, I'd like to make a statement, and you guys are welcome to challenge it. But hello, welcome. Help yourself to some pizza and drinks.
Yeah. I was late, then I wanted to Titanic building.
Okay.
I was supposed to read
So consider, and this is a very simplified view, but consider that legacy sovereignties provide three main things. Okay. Number one is they provide, let's say, a currency, and hopefully it's a stable currency. Number two is they provide identity through our citizenship and our passports and things like that. And number three is they provide some sort of organized military, police, and property rights protection. Okay. So those have been three core functions of legacy governments. Okay. Now let's compare what's opening up with these what I've termed to be virtual sovereignties. So virtual sovereignties, now with the introduction of Libra, Facebook's, and by the way, the other dimension to keep in mind on this is that you think that Google and Amazon and the other social media realms are just going to sit by while Libra takes off? I don't think so.
I think Chase will be a good competitor with their cryptocurrency.
Well, Chase has announced the coin,
Yeah.
JPM coin,
Yeah.
and there's other coins that are in the works. I think Amazon, Target. There's a bunch of coin projects that are. I think it's Target that's in the works on a coin. So Libra and the consortium of companies is just sort of the first round. And I would be really, really surprised if the other folks just don't kind of sit by. But to get back to the to boil it down into three fundamental services of governments, which is some sort of currency, identity, and then some sort of military
Law enforcement.
Law enforcement, right? Military. So the virtual sovereignties, if you look at Libra as being like the first round of the social media virtual sovereignties, introducing a currency, which they can do now with the cryptographically secure blockchain constructs, as we call them, or distributed ledger technologies. Identity, I would say that the social media platforms are way, way ahead of just about everybody else, with maybe the exception of the legacy sovereignties in terms of identity, because they have been working on identity for years. And the other big player is Microsoft. Microsoft has a huge appetite to have some sort of workable, decentralized identity structure. But the one area that I would say most people would say the social media platforms have, where they have not, they don't have the capability, is in the military. And they don't have armies, they don't have tanks, they don't have air forces, and so forth. Here's an interesting point about that. And this point was made by this fellow, Thomas E. Ricks, who actually spoke at ASU a couple of years ago at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. And here's an article about what he had to say. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who specializes in military and defense, cybersecurity and stuff like that. And this is his talk, and we're not going to play his talk, but basically he says that societies have a tendency to build militaries that are designed for the last war. So, however the last war went, that's how a society tends to build up their military. And in his talk, he says that our Air Force, our Navy, all of our Army constructs are designed for basically an obsolete way to fight wars. So he says that an aircraft carrier is basically just a big kick-me sign floating out in the middle of the ocean. Because it's this big target.
Painted target on the side.
Right, it's a big target. And he says that the military academies are designed to teach the military leadership how to be effective versus adaptive. They totally miss how to be adaptive. And when you start to lay that on top of what's happening with cybersecurity, where basically we're having attacks on just about every realm of our societal infrastructure, it's clear to see that the attackers are adaptive. And the military defense is not adaptive. It's very structured. So if there's anything you get out of this talk or this whole session tonight, I highly recommend that you listen to Thomas Ricks' presentation at Cronkite, because it's very eye-opening. But the point is that although Facebook does not have a military, I would say they are way ahead of the game in terms of their technical knowledge to defend against cyber attacks, to possibly, do something counter. So you're shaking your head now.
Well, Amazon's been hacked. I mean, they've all been hacked. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a huge thing. Okay, so.
I'm not saying they're bulletproof.
Well, no one is. So that's.
All I'm saying is that their army, if you will, of developers is far better equipped, in my view, to deal with a cyber war than certainly Chase or AT&T.
So how come WannaCry was so effective?
Well,
So,
first of all, I think WannaCry was affected for a multitude of reasons.
and it's,
But the other thing that I think you get a appreciate, or that comes to mind on this Libra and the introduction of blockchain by Facebook is that's a decentralized construct versus a client-server construct. Client-server, in my view, will never be defendable. Perimeter hardening, trying to keep out the bad guys, is always a losing proposition. The decentralized realm, peer-to-peer, no client-server, that, in my view, is the best hope we have for some sort of return to virtual security. So that's just Jay's opinion.
but it's also important to realize that this isn't the currency.
This is a currency.
This isn't the currency. This is an asset. According to IRS rules, it's an asset.
Libra?
Yeah, it's an asset.
Okay.
So you go ahead, you make one, it'll be an asset, and when you come time, you go to use that, you're going to have to go to the IRS and say, this is it, and they're going to say, okay, we did that, then we can collect our tax. So while all this is happening, right, the IRS is going to be getting money because this isn't the currency, because there's no government behind it.
Well, in this realm, Ron, it's much like a prism. If you can look at the same token of the same coin, and in one light it can look like a currency, in another light it can look like an asset, in another light it can look like a commodity. So there's a whole spectrum of how these things called currencies or coins or whatever can look, and it's basically many times it's in the eye of the beholder. But the point is, to go back to the 3 points about the sovereignty, let's say, whether it's virtual or legacy or geographic, currency, identity, and then some sort of property rights protection or military protection. And I'm just throwing this out there. This is just basically Jay's opinion, but I think that the social media realm actually has something akin to what I would call a contemporary military or property rights capability that I would say generally is not talked about or underestimated. So anyway, let's move on.
There might be things too that we are not aware of. I know a few years ago I read an article about Russia. Some Russian divers were doing some service work on one of the undersea trunk lines, and they found a tap on there that somebody had placed, and they of course thought it was U.S. and probably was, but it was capturing all of their data, internet traffic. Instead of going to the normal channels, it was actually taking a detour and capturing. Actually, it was like copying. But and it was on one of their trunk lines that had all their telephone and internet lines up for undersea things. And so, that until that article, I had no idea that any kind of stuff was going on. And probably the stuff the military has for cyber war, we probably don't know some of their best tools.
To give you an idea of how the technology is, the first submarine to do this is this is to be Carter. That's the submarine that did that.
Is that right?
Well, so this brings up another point that we'll touch upon just briefly, which is proprietary cyber constructs versus open source. So, in my view, if you're talking about a proprietary construct where data is flowing over some sort of line underneath the ocean, if it's proprietary, there's a higher probability, in my view, that it has some sort of backdoor or some sort of vulnerability that's harder to detect or harder to protect against than open source. And one of the things about Libra supposedly is it's open source. So, and that's kind of another shift in the whole realm, the overall realm, is a move from proprietary to open source. And I think it's going to be harder. If something's truly open source, I think it's going to be easy. It's going to be more secure in the long run. So, but this is an excerpt from the Libra paper. Additional goal of the association is to develop and promote an open identity standard. And we believe that decentralized and affordable digital identity is a prerequisite to financial inclusion. So clearly, a goal of Libra is to create a sort of a decentralized identity. And in my view, that's one of the key missing pieces out of what we've had in the past. So, property protection, military protection, identity, and then
When you say identity, you mean one that's known or not known? Because
I think it's got to be both.
in their white paper, they're saying that they're going to have the ability to create many many wallets that are anonymous, autonomous. So you don't know who they are, but people can still. It doesn't say anything about this in here, but the know your customer information collection doesn't say anything about that in here. And I'd be interested to know whether they're going to be collecting information like that with wallet addresses.
Well, if they're going to be compliant with legacy financial regulation, they've got to have some sort of know your customer capability, in my view. And I don't know for sure, but
I'll have to collect something. They won't let them operate otherwise.
Yeah, and you have to realize too, they're putting down 10 million plus to play. So I mean, there's some sort of
But then the 10 million is for the ability to be a miner as well as to buy and sell blocks of the current Libra.
well, and to also be a validator node.
Yeah.
So
yeah, which gives them control, and they can say, we don't know who you are, we're not going to validate.
But no doubt they're going to Switzerland for this because of the relaxed regulations, no doubt.
well,
Banking stuff. I mean, it's
yeah. I mean, Switzerland clearly has an advantage over many other sovereignties in terms of attracting
right.
decentralized constructs and cryptocurrency initiatives and platforms. So anyway, those slides just kind of touch upon identity, property rights or military protection, and currency, certainly. So just thoughts for conversation about how this really is blending in to being like sort of a virtual sovereign. Now, here's another dimension that I'd like to bring up to everybody that I haven't seen much talked about, which is there's yet another butting of heads among the virtual sovereignties versus the geographic or the legacy sovereignties, which is this talk of breaking up the big tech companies. So Elizabeth Warren, here's a post that she wrote about why Google, Facebook, and Amazon should be broken up. And I'm not making it. I'm not saying this should or shouldn't happen. I'm just saying that if I was Mark Zuckerberg, I would be really, really concerned about this, or the upper management of Amazon or Facebook or Google, whatever. There's a direct conflict here, and
I see this as them recognizing that they're losing control. That there's a lot happening outside of their sphere of influence that they don't control. I'm
Them
always
being who?
the government leaders.
And I think that this is, they have an advantage that other companies don't have an advantage. And so as far as is being sued for what they say on their websites, the Google, Facebook, I don't know about Amazon so much, but those, they can't be sued for whatever's on their websites.
That's because they need to change from a platform to a.
Well,